What do you think is the lie that founders tell themselves about social media, about PR, about outreach, about all of that stuff?
You've got influencers, you've got creators, you've got other companies. Everyone's just trying to figure out the right way to be present. But the reality is, authenticity of a brand is the most important element. And that is what builds trust and long-term success.
It feels inauthentic sometimes to some entrepreneurs to say, hey, I don't feel comfortable selling myself. What would you say to those people?
I would encourage them to step back and reframe the noise to value, impact, influence. 99% of getting earned media is telling your story in front of your key stakeholders and being able to communicate it so you can bring that value. So being quoted and listed and reviewed by publications, whether it's Forbes or the Today Show or a small paper in your region, is incredibly important in building trust and visibility. Oh, and by the way, now it also, AI goes, oh, I'll take that. I'll put that in my algorithm too. So then when people are looking for something like you, I bring it to the surface for them.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesdays Off podcast. My guest today is Anna Crowe. She is the founder of Crowe Media, an integrated media company that helps purpose-driven brands amplify their reach. She's the author of the book Get Real and the co-host of the podcast The Real Shift Show. She's also a TEDx speaker where she speaks on the power of the immigrant mindset. Anna, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Stavros.
It's a pleasure to have you on. I usually start people off with a real simple question, which is tell us a little bit about what you do and why it's so meaningful to you.
Sure. So in my day job, I run a company called Crowe Media, which you mentioned. And why it's meaningful and what do we do? So it's a combination, it's really an ecosystem of different media tools like public relations, social media marketing, studios, insights, all the things, as well as performance marketing to help what we say bold leaders and purpose-driven brands to really tell their story, to amplify their visibility and drive their growth so they can continue to make a positive impact on humanity. That is our why, and that is a storytelling engine, in other words, that we use to propel those companies.
Why is it so meaningful for you? Like, why do you have such a passion to amplify the message of those folks?
Yeah, I always joke around that I'm likely not going to be the one in the laboratory discovering the next sequenced genome that helps cure cancer, improve lives, or create some really cool companies that establish connections and help people get together. But I'm here to tell that story, to bring it to the world so that they can positively continue to impact more lives and more people. So we work quite a bit in health innovation, in which case we help improve general consumers as well as patient lives. And then we also work in the consumer packaged goods space and help really fun, creative, cool brands come to market and help so that they can create meaningful connections for their customers.
Is this something you discovered that you had a passion for along the way, or do you remember even as a young girl wanting to kind of share the stories and amplify what was going on?
Yeah, it's a funny you should ask because I've often been reflecting on this over the last year because for a decade I had Crowe PR, which was integrated earned media thought leadership PR firm, right? And then recently we launched Crowe Media, which is the evolution and more of an ecosystem. And I was thinking back during this launch, like why now? Well, why now is because of AI and creator economy and attention economy and all that. But why? And I went back to my childhood and yeah, I used to write a lot of poetry. I used to write a lot of short stories. I used to paint quite a bit and, play make believe. And I think storytelling is something that has always been really important to me. I just thought it was such a great way to use your creativity and to connect with others. And then, as I grew up and decided to go into business and started working with different companies, I realized that I was very entrepreneurial. And so building something and helping build other businesses and just seeing, the companies grow and be able to bring on more people and change lives and then marry that with storytelling is really what the subconscious impetus was for Crowe Media.
You talked about the AI economy and the attention economy. What is it like? Like put us in the mind and in the shoes rather of one of your clients? Like, what is it like to be someone who wants to come to you? What are the challenges they're facing? What's difficult? What are they getting right? What's the secret sauce they already have and what's missing for them?
Yeah, well, think about it as a consumer first, right? If we take a bird's eye view, you and I, as decision makers of how we spend our money, what we bring into our lives, we're faced with a lot of information, right? We get a lot of information coming at us at all different ways. Back in the day, you turn on the TV and maybe you'll learn about something, or you read the paper and you'll learn about something, right? You go to the store, you see a product. Nowadays, we pick up our phone and there's like just constant attention, constantly companies, brands, people trying to vie for our attention, right? And so as consumers, whether we're buying services or we're buying products, we're like, oh, I just heard about this really cool invention. Okay, I've changed my mind. I've moved over here, right? Our attention span is less than 47 seconds that we can focus on, just being on the same like media platform. Not to mention our actual attention span is like 8 to 9 seconds of one single thought. So, as consumers, so as brands trying to engage, companies trying to engage, whether it is something that's wellness focused, like, hey, take my supplement, right? Or it is, we have whiskey clients, we have food and beverage clients, like, hey, try this gluten-free pasta. As brands, we're just competing for attention. And so we always take an approach of saying, okay, what's our why as a company? Not ours specifically, but I mean, we know ours, but the brands that we represent, what did they create? What's their why? What is their purpose that they're trying to solve? Because we do like, to work with companies that are making that positive impact that I mentioned. But why are they come to life? Why do they exist? And then who are their customers? Who are they trying to create that connection with and drive more like market penetration with? And then we identify those channels. And, unless you have multi-million-dollar budgets, which not a lot of brands have, and I mean, yes, there's plenty that advertise on Super Bowl and all that stuff, but not every single company has that. But you need to find the right way, strategic ways to engage, to first get awareness to your target customer, and then engage them and then get them to buy from you. And so the media umbrella really helps craft that narrative through more traditional organic storytelling, but leveraging the tools. So when someone's going, hey, Google, hey, ChatGPT, hey, Gemini, what are the 5 best supplements that I should take for my sleeping disorder? Our clients start bubbling up.
You made me think of gossip. Right. So when you said back in the day, maybe we would turn on the TV and we'd kind of learn whatever was on the programming or read the paper. And if we go even further back than that, the way we got our news was really through gossip, right? Like
Word
that's
of mouth, yeah.
and it feels to me like sometimes social media feels to me like all the gossip of the entire world, you know what I mean, crammed into your phone and being thrown at you at lightning speed.
Yes, and how much of it is real, right? How much of it is
100%.
real and how much is just fake news?
Yeah, 100%, right? Because that's true with gossip too. Some portion of it is real and some portion of it is just somebody bad-mouthing somebody else, and that's what we get. And so I wonder, what is the lie that you think most, I know you keep using the word brands, I'll use the word founder just because there's somebody at the center of that brand, right? So what do you think is the lie that founders tell themselves about social media, about PR, about outreach, about all of that stuff? What do you think most entrepreneurs believe that they actually holds them back from actually succeeding in this way?
Yeah, I think to most entrepreneurs, social media can be very overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And, there's all these fun memes like, oh, I didn't realize my second job was going to be creating reels and content. And there's a lot, if you're really, I think the overwhelm can be, and the misconception is, let me just invest in some advertisements because I can't compete organically. This is super competitive. I mean, you've got influencers, you've got creators, you've got other companies. So everyone's just trying to figure out the right way to be present. But the reality is, authenticity of a brand is the most important element. And that is what builds trust and long-term success. So yes, someone can say, oh my gosh, I got a $5 million budget out of nowhere. My investors gave me $5 million. Let me throw it all on ads and get a bunch of spend out going so that people buy from me. And that may result, of course, in some real-time purchases. But the minute you turn those off and you run out of money, you don't have a brand and people forget who you are. So we tell our entrepreneurs and founders and organizations, you've got to have a consistent story that is clear, that's compelling, that is in alignment with who you are and why you've come to be. Because even though we have this attention economy, studies also show that people will go deeper and spend longer amounts of time with people and companies that they trust and whose values align with their own values. So competing for the sake of competing and throwing money at the problem is not the solution. It's really understanding who you are as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as an organization, and being able to uphold that in a digital landscape.
That makes a lot of sense in the way you're describing it. And I would have no idea about how to put it into practice. Like I would be at a loss. I'd be like, I think I'm doing that, but what's not working?
100%. And marketing, it's funny. I did my undergrad in accounting. So I looked at marketing like, well, I have the most important job because I handle the money. And marketers are creatives and they come up with ideas and we don't know. So, and that was a misconception because then I got my MBA in marketing after working in finance and accounting and marketing and sales for a number of years. And I realized like without marketing, we don't have a business. And marketing is a lot more than just putting an ad on Super Bowl or creating a social media account, right? I mean, marketing in the general term is coming up with a product, understanding the brand attributes of the product, what's going to build that trust, the colors, the everything, right? The logo. And then the promotional arm of marketing is, well, I've got PR, I've got advertising, I've got social media, I've got billboards, outdoor advertising, right? And so it really is important to as a founder, entrepreneur, or as a company, stand back and be like, okay, let's understand why we're here. What's our brand narrative? Let's understand the purpose that we're serving for the customers. Who are our customers? And how do we communicate to them and use the right promotional vehicles to get to them so they truly understand us, they engage with us, they connect with us, and we become kind of a non-negotiable in their life. And there's not a one size fits all because like I said, there's a million different ways. But the problem is a lot of brands spend millions of dollars on the ways that don't actually yield long-term success. So yeah, it's helpful to have an expert in the room to say, okay, oh, and by the way, things are continuously changing, right? We were just talking about this in a meeting. Hashtags are out. I used to love hashtags on social media. I'm like, hashtag entrepreneurship, hashtag everything. Now it's like, doesn't matter. So if you're not attuned to that stuff, you're also be missing on the algorithmic piece of digital marketing, which is a whole other animal, right? So having the right partners, the right experts, hiring the right people to truly understand your customer, your value proposition, and how to best engage them on an ongoing basis is really paramount.
You're pointing at an interesting dichotomy, if you will, which is in one side showing up and being really authentic and being who you are, but at the other side, knowing how to play that game. Because there are algorithms involved and there are the recent trends that seem to be working. And there is a whole other side of it, which sometimes feels like those two things are at odds, right? Because you just kind of want to be authentic, but then you're also like, well, what's working right now? And how do I bend our brand and myself to feed into this? Have you coached founders through that? Have you experienced that problem?
The reality is it's both. However, if I had to pick one, the authenticity is going to outweigh anything else, right? In my head, it's 98 to 2%.
Okay.
It's 98, your authentic self, staying true to who you are, sharing and connecting with customers. Even if it's one customer, if you've improved one life, you've done something right. Now, your investors may say differently because that doesn't drive the P&L bottom line. But I do believe that is it's like that Dr. Seuss, today you are you, that is truer than true. There's no one alive that is you or you, right? If you're going to do something, if you're going to start a business, if you're going to run a company, it's got to be the best value to your customers, or why do it?
Yeah. And
so that authenticity has to be there. And yes, in a digital world, you've got to play some of the games. I mean, I'll tell you, earned media, 99% of getting earned media is telling your story in front of your key stakeholders and being able to communicate it so you can bring that value. Oh, and by the way, in 2026, it also adds to your AI search opportunities.
Hmm.
So being quoted and listed and reviewed by publications, whether it's Forbes or the Today Show or a small paper in your region, is incredibly important in building trust and visibility. Oh, and by the way, now it also AI goes, oh, I'll take that. I'll put that in my
Yeah.
algorithm too. So that when people are looking for something like you, I bring it to the surface for them.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, right? Because, well, just the way I understand how chatbots get their data and what they do, that makes perfect sense. That the more, it's kind of like what Google used to do with search and indexing search, but now it's just on steroids across the board, right? So
Yes, now it's like you can't get away from it and you've got to keep up with it. And wait, and how do we do this? And how am I found? How is my company found? Right? It's continuously evolving, and I'm sure AI will continue to evolve. So even that method, there'll be other pieces to it. But it's fascinating.
I wrote a series of articles a while ago, and I just published them on LinkedIn. And this was early on, and my logic was I just want to write really good quality content, right? Like I don't, I'm not going to focus on reach or on anything like that. And I feel like I wrote some really really great articles. I don't remember if it was 20 or 18 or something like that in total. I think maybe it was 20 or 21, and 20 of them got like 1,000 views, and then one of them got like 100,000 views. And the difference was not the quality of the article at all that made the difference in the search. It's just the topic that I chose to write about was something that was very social. And so I tagged a bunch of people in a bunch of organizations because they were all involved. And that reach just kind of amplified tremendously how many views that article got. And so that made me realize that when we say social media, the social is almost the bigger part of it than the media part of it, right? Because you don't have to have the most excellently produced video or the most excellently produced podcast, or, there's a hygiene factor, there's a threshold. And as long as you meet that threshold, so much, the rest of it is the idea, the rest of it is, getting discovered, putting it in front of people. And as someone who hates being interrupted, like I religiously unsubscribe from newsletters, from everything, because I don't want noise. The act of going out and selling, you know what I mean, or promoting yourself is a way creating noise for other people. And it takes a toll internally. It feels inauthentic sometimes to some entrepreneurs to say, hey, I don't feel comfortable selling myself. What would you say to those people?
I would encourage them to step back and reframe the noise to value,
Mm-hmm.
impact, influence. What is the positive impact that I can make on someone with this one article? And I
Mm.
go back, I don't really count likes or shares or engagement. I know I'm supposed to. I know we tell our clients, oh, got 100,000 shares. That's amazing, right? That's good stuff because your reach is wider and we want the bigger impact. Yes. For me and or for entrepreneurs, what is it? What is the value of what I'm saying, what I'm writing? And if it touches one life, then I've done my job, right? Because at the end of the day, we all want to make an impact. Even people who say, no, I don't care, I just want to sell a bunch of stuff. Well, for the most part, good humans want to make positive impact. And so, one thing that you also you mentioned is you've got the content, right? Is my content valuable? You've got the community, the social element. Who is going to see this valuable content? And the third part of which makes things go viral sometimes to take you from that 1,000 to 100,000 is the timely trend. What's happening in the world that day, sometimes that hour. Right. So the macroeconomic environment, to put it, business spin on it, is just as important, because how many times a conversation becomes relevant because there's just a need for it in that particular moment in time. I'll tell you, when I did my TEDx, I decided on a topic in October of 2024, right? I went and did it in April 2025. A lot happened in the time frame that I did it. The topic is, as you mentioned, the power of the immigrant mindset. Well, the immigration conversation in October 2024 was very different than April 2025 than February 2026 that will be in March 2029, right? And so sometimes, my TEDx went pretty crazy online. And people were really engaging with it. Like, man, this reminds me of my grandmother. Oh man, this reminds me of my dad. Oh man, this reminds me of thing. And, and it's timing.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of times you could, and I find this the other way too. Like I'll read a book. I don't know if you feel this way. Tell me. I'll read a book and I'm like, okay, I get it. That's very cool. I love the concept. One of my favorite books. And then 5 years will go by. My life has changed. I changed, right? And I'll read the same book and I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea this was in the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we have a different...
Both ways. I've had that happen both ways, where you read the book 5 years later, like, why did I really like this book? I don't get it, right? Totally. I've also been like, why didn't I really like this book the first time? Because it's so much better now. Yeah.
Right. I'm like, did I miss these 4 chapters? No, I wasn't looking for that at that time. Same thing with our content. It could hit someone one day and be like, meh. And then a year later go, oh my gosh, Stavros, I can't believe you wrote this article.
Is that something that founders need to be proactive about, saying like, what's in the news, what's the trends, and try to live up to it? Or is it just you just do your thing, and when the timing lines up, the timing lines up?
That's it, I think. And so that's the third, the macro economic, right? You've got here's what I can control, the micro, my value proposition, what I'm trying to inspire or change, ignite, whatever the thought, whatever your why for putting that content out. There are the people and their reaction to it. And if they share and they cross share and all the things, and then there's like, oh, by the way, what's happening in the world around me?
Tell us about the immigrant mindset. Do you, when you describe it in your TEDx talk, tell us a little bit about it. How do you see it? Where do you think it comes from? How do you think it plays out?
Yeah, I think sometimes, we as humans, human nature can make a quick assumption about a person when we meet them based on where they're from. Oh, you're Greek? I know 5 other Greeks and I know exactly how you think and feel and what's important to you, right? Just a natural thing. My theme of the episode was really about how immigrants, no matter where you're from, no matter how old you were when you came to another country, and it doesn't have to be just immigrants coming to the US, it could be immigrants all over the world, that there is this element of starting new in a new land. And sometimes you don't speak the language, right? You are unfamiliar with cultures. You don't know the basic things, the right and the wrong of the culture or the values. And so you have to work a little bit harder. And as you work harder, you develop these really cool superpowers, as I call them. Resourcefulness is one, adaptability, resilience. That's a big one. I talk about resilience. Because you're up against, it just feels like for many people, maybe not for everyone, but for many people, it feels like you're just climbing this mountain and just trying to learn while also being able to show up who you are and not being embarrassed about who you are. And oftentimes you are embarrassed about who you are because you're different. And we don't realize the differences are really a superpower as well for many years. At least I didn't. And then you start embracing them. So it really speaks to, the mindset of the immigrant and how their journey shapes who they are and what an asset that is to a community, to a professional environment, to the world, to have differences, not just have the differences of bringing the different viewpoint based on your background, but also these superpowers that you develop. And, I talk about different stats around how many immigrants exist, especially in the US, but also the starting businesses, I think it was 80 or 85% of entrepreneurs are either first generation, like they're immigrants themselves or their parents are immigrants. And I think as an entrepreneur, we got to have resilience. We've got to have that grind. We've got to have resourcefulness because sometimes you have 2 pennies to rub together and you've got to make payroll. And so I think the two play and work really well together.
We had an investor in a company I started a long time ago. And the question he asked me, he said, how would your grandfather start this business? Right? Because we were trying to raise money and we were trying to do, get it off a certain way. And he said, well, how would your grandfather run this business? How would he get it off the ground? Right. To which he was asking, how can you, really reduce the amount of risk you're asking me to take and that you're taking yourself? Right. And it was useful. It was a useful exercise because too many times we just have a shiny version in our heads and we want to do the biggest, shiniest version. But what we're really doing is robbing ourselves of the learning that we would get if we started with the cruder, smaller version and let the market tell us what it wants and get that data, get that feedback, which is so valuable. What's your story? So were you born here to immigrant parents or did you immigrate over yourself?
I immigrated as a teen. So as a young teenager, from Eastern Europe to New York. and moved to the
Hmm.
Bronx. And so, yeah, I was one of the ones that didn't speak the language and ended up going
Were
to
you in
American
middle school,
school.
high school when you say
Middle
teen?
school.
Middle
Middle
school,
school,
okay.
yeah. So, yeah, so imagine, seventh grade,
Hmm.
as awkward as that phase is, I know, because one of my sons is in seventh grade now, and it's a tough age. Kids are, everyone's discovering themselves, trying to figure it out, trying to fit in. Oh, thankfully we didn't have social media back then, but still. So yeah, and I didn't obviously didn't speak the language, and so there was a lot of, falling on my face, a lot of trying to take in information, absorb the language, absorb the culture. There's a very clear example. I walked into a classroom, and my first day in an American classroom in the Bronx, and observing everybody. And then I said, you know what? I think I know the answer to this one question that this teacher is asking. I think I'm going to do this, and she asked the question. I kind of understood, and I raised my hand, and she's, pointed to me, and I stood up, to answer the question, because that's what we did where I come from. And the whole class just started cracking up, and pointing at me. And I was so self-conscious. I was just like, oh my God, and I just like melted back into the chair and vowed to never speak again. So it's those little things that to an adult don't seem like a big deal, but to a formative mind, you're just like, but I mean, but even so, if you were an adult and you went to an office and you did something, you probably feel slightly embarrassed anyways, because you just messed up. And I think as long as at least I do, it's like I don't have a lot of room to mess up. I saw myself as judged already because, being different, and then trying to prove myself. And it's like the learning curve. I'm like, okay, got a fast learning curve. Like, don't slip up, like don't. And I notice that whenever I meet people, people do get defensive, like where they're from, because they don't want to be prejudged based on where they're from. And my goal is that you go, where are you from? Oh my gosh, tell me more. Like, I want to learn. Tell me about your experience. Like, I would love it if we all approach from a place of curiosity and recognizing the potential superpowers that this person holds versus a place of, oh, that's where you're from. Or let me think of what I know about that culture.
Isn't it interesting how it's kind of both parties are involved? So I grew up in New York City, different borough, but very close to the Bronx. And when I moved to Florida 10 years ago, not everybody, but on occasion, people would say, well, where's your accent from? And to me, I was like, what are you talking about? I don't think of myself as someone with an accent, but apparently to some subset of the people who live here in Florida, I had an accent, and I don't know if it was a Greek accent or if it was a Greek American accent or if it was a New York accent. I have no idea. Um, but it did not make me feel good. I was like, it put a spotlight on something that I didn't realize needed a spotlight, and so it made me self-conscious and uncomfortable, right? And it's not a big deal. It's not the same experience as you in middle school, but even as an adult, we're subject to those things, I think.
100%. And, I think that leads to a much bigger conversation around our identity. What is my identity? And when people start associating with whether it's Stavros, that guy with the accent, right? You immediately label based on something. And sometimes can be positive. And, Stavros is, that amazingly smart guy that I met, right? And sometimes it's like, well, wait a second, hold on. Before we start putting labels on me, let's get to know each other. So I think it's just one of those, elements of being wherever. And again, it doesn't, my point in the talk is it doesn't have to be immigrants. I think it's curiosity around people all over the world that are, could be born and raised in the same place, but just having a slightly different understanding perhaps, and curiosity.
So when your family came over, do you have siblings? Did you guys come over
I do
together?
have a younger sister. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it harder, easier for her? How do you think it was with the age difference?
Oh man, I don't know if it was harder or easier or both, because she was younger. So I think on the one side, it was easier for her to just learn the language and be, culturally thrown into the culture. But on the other hand, she still continues to, growing up with my parents and still a difference of culture, right? And I kind of feel like I have both. where she may be like, this is alien, like you guys are crazy. And this is the culture that I'm a part of. So I think she has just a different experience. Like I was not allowed to go to a sleepover as a kid because we have our own bed at home. Why would you ever go sleep somewhere else? Whereas by the time my sister got to be at that age, it's like, yeah, go ahead, go to sleepover. So that was like easier for her because those cultural things became the norm for my family too. Whereas I kind of had to break some things for her. But I think also it was just harder for her in other ways.
My mother came to this country when I think she was 19. And probably the first time I heard her say this was maybe when she was 40, 45, where she said, I feel like I never quite fit in here. And now when I go back to Greece, I feel like I don't fit in there anymore either, which is a really interesting observation on her part. And I don't think it's something that many people realize if they don't have the experience themselves. And when you mentioned, for your sister, how, the culture that she came from was almost alien to her, like it made me think of my mom's story there.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I can 100% appreciate that. So, I mean, the cool thing is you've got these two different cultures and mindsets in your mind, and how do you use them, right?
Yeah.
It's double the richness for her. So that's incredible. But to the same point, it's like it's harder to go deeper on each one because you're constantly balancing. It's like when you speak multiple languages, right? Sometimes you're like thinking in one, like it's so cool, and your brain works in different ways. But sometimes like, but I can't really get deep on this one because I've got this other stuff. So, or at least as quickly.
That's where I think immigrant communities kind of come out, because you now are with people who have gone through that same journey as you, and who also feel like they don't quite fit into this new place, but they no longer fit into the old place. And so there's this microcosm. I grew up in Astoria, Queens, and I think it was 100,000+ Greeks when I was growing up there. Even though I was born in this country, I learned to speak Greek before I learned to speak English. And one of the most fascinating things I learned about Astoria is that the community really came together during the 60s and 70s. And the Greeks who came over held on to the values of Greece in the 60s and the 70s. And for the next 20, 30 years, Greece goes on to westernize and the culture in Greece starts to change. And so the cultures I grew up with were actually closer to the cultures of 20 years earlier in Greece, because that's what they had held on to, and that's what they brought us. That's how they raised us. And so it's an interesting phenomenon that you create these little pockets of culture, in these immigrant neighborhoods.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that. I think that's very cool, right? They kind of like kept a piece of history.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just it's a variation of the American culture, of the Greek culture, kind of stuck in a time that they're comfortable with. And there's some beauty in that and some richness in that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell us about the book and the podcast. Are they also on the immigrant topic, or are they other things?
No. So the book Get Real was my first book that I published in 2019. And it does have parts of the story in it because, it's my story, but it really is about, the difficulty that we as humans face of being true to who we really are, being authentic, showing up authentically, being comfortable in our skin, living the life and the success that is meant for us versus someone else's definition of success. And I think for me, that was really hard because when I came over, it was like, okay, you're now American. You're going to, make sure you say the right things and do the right things. And I felt like I lost a little piece of myself because I was trying so hard to fit in. And then only later in life, I was like, wait a second, look at all these cool things that make me unique and that make other people unique. Right. So that was really, and then when I started working in New York and I was in my 20s and then, I became a manager and started working with different people, I realized this disconnect in professional settings too, in corporate environments, where people felt like they had to put on a facade to be trusted or respected. like I'm your boss now. So let me tell you, like, so the book is about, get real. It's just like, hey, what's your journey? What's your authentic self? How do you connect with people by being who you are? How do you lead authentically instead of trying to be someone you're not to get respect? How do you build a company? There's an entrepreneurial chapter with transparency, right? And then how do you, I have a little chapter on transparent and authentic brands too, and PR. So, but yeah, that was the impetus for that. And then what was cool is I put that out in 2019. I actually, to your point about earlier, I really didn't do any marketing for it. I did nothing. I was just like, I wanted to tell this story. Here it is. It's out there, right? And then I kind of forgot about it. And then I started doing all this work. I did 2020, COVID started. I started working with a neuroscientist, applied neuroscientist. I was started my spiritual journey. I had my awakening and all the things, and started really understanding who I was on a completely different, deeper level. Not different, deeper level.
Yeah.
And so I had been thinking about the follow-up book, and the follow-up book that came to me was The Real Shift. And the idea is that, okay, you got to where you are today, but something feels misaligned. And you could be 20 or you could be 80 or you could be 55 or whatever the age is. A lot of people feel this in their 40s that I've found. Like something doesn't quite fit. Like I'm happy, I have a really great career, I've got what I needed, but something just, I don't know. And so the premise is, understanding what that is and making shifts in your life. And sometimes it could be a baby shift. Like I'm going to create a new habit. I'm going to start a new habit. I've always wanted to paint and I've never done that. I'm going to start painting. Right. Or it could be, gosh, my relationship is not right for me. This is just not the right thing. Right. So you'll see people get divorced and all these other things, but so it's creating that awareness and finding the right ways to make the shifts. And there's a spiritual element to it. There's a practical element to it. So anyway, so that was the book I started working on. And I wasn't quite ready to publish it. I prioritized the Power of the Immigrant Mindset, which is now my next book. But I decided that with my friend Katie, who is an Emmy award-winning sports journalist, former sports journalist, we've been talking about this idea for a show. And so we said, you know what, why don't we take this real shift concept and make it into a show? Interview a lot of really cool people, understand how they've made shifts, understand what drove them to create change in their life. What was that aha moment, if one existed? And then we'll get some really interesting, it'll be a really interesting way to share that message outside the book. And then when the time comes, the book will be a complement to it.
What was what you said, you alluded to an awakening. What does that mean for you?
Oh my, well, this is like a woo-woo conversation, but, it's a spiritual awakening. Yeah. When I just looked at the world all of a sudden and go, oh my gosh, there is magic here that I just didn't realize existed. Like, you get hints of it throughout your life. Like, oh, that was weird that happened. Oh, I see this. And this is interesting. And I think, when I got to be in my 40s, I all of a sudden just shifted my perspective and saw the world in a completely different way and saw my life in a completely different way. So, started looking for my purpose in a different way, understanding my purpose and not looking for it. It was always there, understanding it, understanding who I am under the layers that I've built up to protect myself in this lifetime, peeling back a lot of those layers. That's a really, really cool journey. And I think it happens to people in different parts of their lives if they're open to it. I think for me, I share this in the TED. It's not really, I don't talk about this a lot, but I did share this here and there. I had 2 cancers before I turned 45. And my second one was not great. It was 3 surgeries. It was pretty intense on my mind and body. And when that happened, it was like, I just got jolted into this awakening. Like I started seeing things like that I just took for granted in my life. So I look at it as like a little bit of magic. But when you think about, when people talk about manifestation, when they talk about spirituality and all these things, I think a lot of that has to do with awakening. It just looks different for people.
I like the use of your word magic. For me, I think, in my mid 40s, there was a moment where I'm just like, man, everything's perfect and I'm not happy. What's wrong? Right. And just like you said, A lot of it was about shedding, right? Like we think about finding ourselves and we start looking out there. And really it's about letting go of things we've held on to. Specifically for me, it was about identity, right? And I think for many people, it's just like I heard a wonderful quote on another podcast on the Modern Wisdom podcast. And he was quoting someone else. So I don't know who to attribute this to, but he said, sometimes it's hard to hide from the monster I've created to protect myself. Right? Like, wow. Like, you know what I mean? Like we've built all of this identity, we've built all of these layers to kind of protect, and keep fear at bay. And then all of a sudden that starts to control and dominate your life. And you're like, I don't want to do that, and I don't want to be that anymore. And it's the hardest thing to do is another quote. The hardest thing to do is not be who you were yesterday. Like, like you've had so much practice at being who you were yesterday. So that transformation that you're talking about, um, awakening makes it sound like it's a single moment, but I think that moment then kicks off what is potentially a lifetime of continued work and discovery.
100. I think it's an ongoing, yeah. Awakening is waking up. To me, it's like waking up. So
Yeah.
it is slow and gradual, right?
Yeah.
And you're right. I think, especially if you're like a growth-minded person, if you're
Mhm.
like, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to learn that, I'm going to achieve this, it's really hard to start unlearning things.
Mhm.
Like, I think it would be a lot easier for me to just like learn how to unlearn.
Yeah.
It's like, you just have to stop learning. It's like we already have so much inside of us. And to your point, it is these layers. And by the way, to your comment earlier, yeah, there are statistics that I'm not going to share because I can't remember the right one, but something like our thoughts, like something like 80% of our thoughts from yesterday repeat the next day.
Yeah.
So much of it is just in our brain, right? Habits, we're all just repetitive.
Yeah.
So to stop in your tracks and be like, wait a second, I physically have to change my biology day by day in order to unlearn this behavior or to change this habit. That's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Is the most profound, in my opinion, work that you can do, because we came
Yep.
to this planet like knowing everything, like a lot of things already, right? And then we just learned, and obviously a lot of things we learn benefit us 100%, and some things that benefited us when we were 20 or 30 don't benefit us anymore.
We outgrow them. It's ultimately, I think there's a couple of things I want to piggyback there. One, there is no outside assessment. Like, like if something's right or wrong, like your gut knows, right? And I always go back to, am I happy? Am I sleeping well? If I'm happy and I'm sleeping well, then life's good, right? But like, if I'm not sleeping well or if I'm not happy, then something's up and I need to dig. Two, I think the work actually gets, as much as it pains me to admit this, the work gets harder over time. The more aware you become of yourself, the harder it is to shed and fix more ancient things that you've got built into you, right? Like, just sometimes you just notice that your body's having like a fear response and you're like, oh, right. Just first, even just coming to it takes so much work to get to the point where you realize your body's having a fear response. And then you're like, oh, now I've realized that now the work is done. Oh no, my friend, now your work can start. And it's not easy, you know what I mean? Because now you're trying to get to some deeper biology to really kind of shed that fear response. And you've put that there when you were a child, you know what I mean, to protect yourself. So
100%. I mean, spot on. And let's not forget also, I'm happy. I have a good home. Something feels a little off. Like it would be I feel like I'd be more joyful if this happened. But a lot of people get stuck like, am I worth it?
Yeah.
Am I deserving of that? Or should I just be happy with what I've got? And it's hard to answer that question for anybody, right? Because like, am I trying to get something that I really don't deserve? Like I should just be happy with where I'm at, right? So there's that. I think I like to also think about curiosity and intuition, right? Where do they play in all these things? I spoke recently to a group of women, young women at a college. They had like a women in business organization society. And I did a little talk. And then one of the gals came up to me and she goes, My parents, we immigrated here from, from another country. And, uh, you know, traditionally, my parents think this is what I should do with my life because that is what generations upon generations have done. But I feel like I'm meant for something bigger. What do I do with that feeling? Do I just suppress it and do what my parents tell me? And that's a genuine question that a lot of us face. And it's like, am I going to disappoint a bunch of people because I want to do things the way I want to do because I believe in myself? Do I really believe in myself? Can I really do it? It is not easy. And that stuff requires work. And, you mentioned you've got your barometer, your litmus test. Am I sleeping? Am I happy? I think it's important to understand what is everyone's litmus test, right? How do I gauge where I'm at?
Yeah,
And not just go through life asleep.
and there's no right or wrong in terms of should that young woman do either one. Like, she needs to ask herself which one she wants to live with. Right. They both have,
No one
it's a
can tell
trade-off.
her.
At the end of the day, it's a trade-off.
And only the person whose body it is knows the right thing and will do the thing, right? And by the way, what is right and wrong, to your point? And by the way, hopefully you've got many years to pivot and make shifts. But there's a really great name of a book called, it's by Wayne Dyer.
Yeah.
And it's called something like Don't Die with the Music Inside You. And I believe the premise is, do what you came here to do. Don't get to the end of your life and go, I wish, I shoulda, I coulda, I didn't, right? Now, that sounds amazing, but it also adds a lot of pressure to people. Well, that means I've got to change everything tomorrow. And so the real shift is really about keep it just a minor baby shift. You don't have to change your whole entire life. But if you make a choice to create shifts on an ongoing basis, whether it's every day or every week or every month, eventually, and you align those shifts with what feels right to you, your intuition, right? Your kind of a compass, your clarity for your why, then you'll get there. There's no way the journey will miss you.
The incremental nature of change is an interesting one. For example, right now I'm building a habit to just get a morning flexibility routine in. It's something I usually neglect. I go straight to running or lifting. And so I'm building this habit. And I've probably built hundreds, if not thousands of habits over the years by being really intentional. Without fail, every single time, a couple of things happen. One, those incremental shifts compound over time, and I live a vastly different life than I did because of small changes. But two, and more importantly, that I want the audience to hear, is every single time I also fail. I also fall off the wagon. I also lose the habit. I also X, Y, and Z. But it doesn't matter because I've built the muscle of making habits. And so let's say I build a flexibility habit and I keep it up for 6 months and then I give it up. Then it just goes away. It goes by the wayside. There's only so much time in the day. It doesn't matter because if I ever want it back, it's so much more accessible now that I've put the work in once. And of the 1,000 habits I've intentionally tried to build, maybe there's only 4 or 5 that I'm practicing right now. But there's 20 that are in my sphere that I could pick up at any time. And there's 100 that, if I really wanted to. And so I think it's the work, not the outcome, that matters, right? The outcome will set itself.
Well, and to your point, it's to use a cliche, it's the journey, not the destination, right? And if we think about the word practice, I've got a new morning practice.
Yeah.
You're practicing.
Yeah.
You're going to fail at practice. You're going to do better one day and next. I did the same thing. I was, did a 30, I have one of my homeworks from one of my coaches that I work with 33 days of morning stillness for 30 minutes where I don't do anything but just, and if I miss a day, I've got to restart. And I'm like a classic entrepreneur where I can start a million different things and abandon them pretty quickly, right? And so, but to your point, now they're in my repertoire. And when I want to go back to them, I've already started them. They're in my repertoire. It's easier to pick it up, right? So same thing. I was going for like 20 days. I was so proud of myself. I'm like crushing this thing. And then like day 21, I traveled, just didn't do it. Didn't do it. And the thing is, I'm supposed to now start again and do for another 33 days. So I couldn't beat myself up, but to your point, you just practice, you start again. That's okay.
I think that's an important part of the equation too. Like some people could take that as failure, and that's how they tell that story to themselves. They say, "Oh, I tried and I failed, therefore I won't do it again." Or, and somebody like you will take that story and they'll be like, "Hey man, I did it for 20 days. That was pretty cool. And I could pick it up anytime I want," right? It's a different story that you're telling yourself. And it probably comes from having tried and succeeded at things in the past, right? Because none of us are going to succeed at everything we do, but many of us will succeed at things that we try to do with persistence. And once you do that for a while, you start to think of yourself as somebody who can win. And then you start telling that story to yourself. I want to dive in here to something about transformation and identity, which is I fundamentally believe that there's this relationship between who you think you are and who the world affirms that you are that allows you to grow and to be who you end up being. And if you try to be someone and the world doesn't affirm it, then you are in a way delusional. And if you don't try to be someone, even though the world can sometimes see it, and then you're stagnant and you're kind of holding yourself back. But there's a balance. Like if you're all the way delusional, it doesn't work. And if you're all the way, kind of reserved, it doesn't work. But there's a balance where you're just delusional enough that you can go and behave as if, and then get proof from the rest of the world that this might actually work, and then continue and kind of go on that journey. I'd love to talk about it specifically around things like manifestation, right? We talked about some woo-woo stuff, and I happen to think I define manifestation as confirmation bias that's working in my favor as opposed to against my favor. But as somebody who's always growing myself, I wonder, how do I know when I'm being too delusional versus how do I know when I'm not being delusional enough, which I think is more of my problem lately. I think lately I just haven't been delusional enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. And it's funny, I just did an episode for the Real Shift Show with Matt Cook, who is an incredible manifestation coach. He just wrote a book about the topic that came out on 11/11/25. And we had a similar question. I said, well, he goes, you can't manifest anything you want. Let's just be clear. He goes, I'm a citizen of UK. I can't manifest becoming the president of the United States in the next 2 years. Just physically, the reality is harder. However, but there's a lot of things that we can manifest, right? And I think, and the way I look at it, and, he talked about it too, is, feeling it before it happens. So when I wrote the Get Real, actually on the back cover, I have the descriptions of the books. Mine is like, fake it till you make it may be an old adage, but it's not sustainable, and it's not how true relationships and connections are formed. Well, he has this thing where don't fake it till you make it, feel it till you make it. And I think manifestation has a lot to do with feeling it, that belief in your whole body. And then the energetically attracting the stuff you want. I mean, it's like, if you think about, okay, I really want to get a white car, right? And all of a sudden you start noticing white cars everywhere. And it's kind of like, you're not attracting any more white cars, but you're also your brain is selectively pulling out the things that you're thinking about that you want. So I think there's like so many layers, and then there's just an element of magic that I really can't explain. But I think that there's the energy piece of it. There's the belief in your mind. There's the attraction because you're now made it clear what you want. They're all part of manifestation.
It's such an interesting topic for me because I don't generally consider myself a woo-woo type person. But I'm going to answer some questions honestly now, and it's going to be completely contradictory information.
Great.
If you asked me what I believed is at the core of reality, I always tell people, reality is our mutual misunderstanding. I don't actually believe that there is a reality. I believe there is just our perception of reality. And if you want to take it to some woo-woo level, it's kind of like it's reality collapsing to the observer in some quantum mechanical way, right? But so we go out and we kind of perceive what we perceive, and that creates reality. And when you and I perceive things the same way, then we have a mutual misunderstanding, right? And so that's what it is. So fundamentally, I think that everything is fluid and everything can change. But if you ask me, can that actually happen in real time? I would by all means be like, absolutely not, right? Like, I don't see how that actually happens. That's just some kind of, magic. But here's what I know from my own experience. Whenever I go out and define that this is non-negotiable, right? This is something I want from the world and it is non-negotiable. Therefore, I'm going to behave as if I already have it, as if it already exists, as if it's already the right way to do. That approach of treating it as non-negotiable changes enough about my behavior, enough about what I'm looking at, enough about what I'm reconfirming, that it does actually end up creating that reality for myself. Mm-hmm. And the hardest part is actually picking something and actually making it non-negotiable, convincing myself that it can actually be a non-negotiable. Once I've convinced myself that it's a non-negotiable, it tends to all fall into place. But convincing myself that it's non-negotiable has always been the hardest part.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you speak to the why is this a non-negotiable? How will my life change when this happens? Why am I craving this in my life, right? And I think then that goes back to ourselves, our purpose in life and all the things. And to your point, yeah, like getting that clarity. And I think that's why it is important to have stillness. That's why it is important to take breaks and step away from everything. When I spoke about neuroscience and the beliefs that we had, one of the beliefs I always had is you got to stay busy or you're going to die. Just be busy. Be busy all the time. Do a million different things. Be busy. Be busy. But because there was this fear of like, if I'm standing still, like something is wrong. And when I realized where that came from, it came a lot from my culture. It came a lot from my upbringing, right? And I associated a lot of it with laziness. Like if I'm not busy, I'm being lazy, and lazy people don't succeed, and lazy people can't put food on the table. It's just this crazy, like totally normalized in my head. And I bet I'm not the only person, right? And I know that for a fact because I'm friends with a lot of women entrepreneurs and we all talk about busyness. So for many years, and then busyness, what did that get me? Not a lot of time to actually think and process and do the things that mattered versus just doing a bunch of things. Now I still got her to a place I wanted to get to financially and or from a business growth and or whatever, right? When I set my goals as a young adult. But at the same time, there was a much more graceful way of getting there. And there were probably things I could have done. Well, definitely could have done differently. Some maybe sooner because they were more important and less urgent, but with busyness, you get a lot of urgency. So to your point, like stepping back, understanding, why do I need this? What is this? Is this really truly what I want in my life? Or did someone tell me that this is what I need? And I'm just fulfilling that prophecy from someone else. And that happens a lot, which is why the shift is important, because then you realize like, what was the point of all this? Right. And that's okay. Also, that's okay, because that's the journey.
You mentioned you had a 7th grader. How does that translate to parenting for you? Like all this learning that you've done about your own transformation, your own awakening, how does that translate to parenting for you?
Oh my gosh, she doesn't want to hear it. I just have to throw my knowledge and run. Like my older one, he's 15, he gives me a more grace of listening to my thoughts about the topic. And even if he doesn't, think it's important, he's like, okay, I'll take that in, Mom, thanks, and moves on, right? And sometimes I see inklings of that in his actions. My little one, I literally have to just like bomb him with something insightful that I think is insightful and run away because I get eye rolls and right. Like we were yesterday, I mean, hopefully he never watches this episode, but yesterday we went to an event that he didn't want to go to. And I said, look, sometimes we just have to do the hard things. He goes, okay, I'm done talking about this. I'm like, no, but let me just tell you, because we're not talking about it. I understand. I'm like, okay, can I just say one thing? And he's like, yes. I said, when the more I do hard things, the easier it becomes to do the hard things in the future. And I just get an eye roll. And I'm like, okay, well, I dropped my knowledge. And hopefully he heard a piece of that. But it's just, it's just different because when you're 13 or 14, you know everything.
Yeah.
When you're 15, 16, 17, you know everything.
Yeah,
it's only when you turn 40.
Right?
And in the 40s, you're like, in the 40s, you're like, I don't know anything. I thought I knew everything. And actually, I don't know anything. or I know too much of stuff that it's not going to serve me well for the next 40 years of my life. So yeah, but that's the process. And so I think to your point, it's like, how do you get it out? I mean, hopefully sometimes it lands and sometimes it just doesn't. And you try to lead by example.
That's where I was going to go. I think if they watch you live by the values you're espousing and they see the results over time, they can learn their own lessons because they're on their own life, right? They're on their own path. They're on their own. We don't, as parents, sometimes we want to feel like we have a lot to do with it and that we somehow own a piece of their life, but no, it's their life. They're going to live it. They're going to have all the consequences. They're going to experience it. And we love them and we want to give them the best leg up, but there's only so much we can do. We can't actually be them, right? So
I think the big thing that I wish I knew sooner, and again, I try not to have regrets, but I wish the things I know now, even that I started learning with, doing the neuroscience work or, the woo-woo stuff, whatever it is, all of that in search of showing up as my best self, right? I wish I showed up as my best self for my kids throughout their entire journey of life. But when you're tired, when you're not getting sleep, I didn't have the tools. I didn't give myself permission to do a meditation for 30 minutes while my kid's crying and just physically didn't do it. And so I wasn't always my best self. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, yeah, that's probably the one thing of piece of knowledge I would have loved to have earlier in my parenting journey. But again, I mean, think about different generations of parenting and different countries of parenting. Like we're just striving for that next level of, but at the end of the day, the impact you make is you try your best and you hope for the best. And yeah, it's and lead by example where you can.
Yeah, I mean, we as parents, especially in this generation, we put so much pressure on ourselves to be these amazing parents and
not to screw them up.
And not to screw them up, right? But if you look back, if you look at other cultures, if you look back one generation, if you look back two generations, the parenting styles were wildly different, right? And I think what I've taken at face value is that I will mess up my kids, right? I will do my best by them, but in no way am I off the hook for messing them up, and they will do whatever healing they need to do because I'm a flawed individual, right? So
yeah, I am 100%, and I think we do have more awareness around that now, right? Because to your point, some of the stuff you and I are talking about, our parents wouldn't dream of talking about on a show, right? So okay, so there's that, and I think the cool thing is now we can also, as we're more aware, we can discuss our mistakes with our kids.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? I may have overreacted there. My bad.
Yeah. No, saying you're sorry. I remember when my kids were not that old, but I did something and it struck me. I was like, I should apologize. And I was like, it occurred to me. I was like, that was wrong. And I should just set the example here and apologize. And it was honestly a novel thought. Like, as ashamed as I am to admit that apologizing to someone was a novel thought, it was a novel thought in the moment. And I was just like, yeah, no. And I think in the long run, it changed our relationship. Like maybe they saw me a little bit more flawed. Maybe they just saw me have the ability to say, I'm sorry. Maybe, who knows what impact it ultimately had. But.
Yeah. And I think also, like, as a parent, especially when the kids are little, we only have so much energy to give throughout the day, right? And sometimes you have to repeat yourself a few times the day. And then especially if you're working as well, and you've got the stress of finances or whatever it is, it's really hard to just be fully like present and in the right state of mind, as they say, right? So it's like, how do you give yourself some grace for that and also be okay with recharging for 5 minutes? Like, you know what? I do need to just take a breather here, and not feel guilty about that. I think that's a big thing that I'm hoping the generations after us will take, and they're going to make their own mistakes and do other stuff, right? I mean, think about even just like our phones now with kids and all this other stuff. Like that's going to be a whole different wild west. But awareness is great, amazing. Trying to make right of the things that don't quite fit, or parenting in a way that you aspire to versus how you're doing is great. And knowing that we're going to screw up is just being human.
I think one of the best skills to develop is the ability to lower the stakes, to de-escalate, right? To basically, we just talked about how, we put all this pressure on ourselves to parent, right? But if you look back, the way it was done, like that's across all of life, whether it's a conversation with yourself where you don't realize it, but you're holding some really high stakes. And if you just took them away, you would have some space to think about it differently. Or conversation with a spouse or a friend, like we are always behaving as if the stakes are this high. And so literally practicing taking those stakes down is probably a very cool skill to develop and use in many aspects of life.
100%.
Whether you're lowering the stakes for yourself or for somebody else, right? Like if somebody comes to you and they need help, if the first thing you could do for them is be like, okay, let's just lower the stakes so that we can, you're having a completely different conversation.
Yeah. And, this is something I'm working on at the moment. And speaking of not learning anything new, one of the things I'm working on getting better at is seeing everything as neutral, not as right or wrong, good or bad, neutral. Because to your point, like our thoughts create the reality. And to one person, one thing could be really good, and the same thing to another person can be really bad. So I've been observing myself trying to operate from a place of neutrality, and it's hard because I have so many preconceived notions about right and wrong, or good and bad, and up and down, right? So, but it's a really cool thing when I see it come to life. It's very de-escalating. Because it's basically reducing that trigger that takes you back into, when this happened last time, this is what happened. And I want to prevent that from happening. So, yeah. So it's just kind of like, you're just more observing, right? So kind of you just reminded me when you said, if someone comes to you like, this is the craziest thing that's ever happened and I don't know how to get out of it. It can be very easy to go, whoa, that's a lot of energy being thrown at me and you're feeling a lot. How do I help you look at this from a neutral place? Because then that is a very cool de-escalating way.
How do we keep neutral from not equaling numb?
I don't know. I don't know yet. I told you I'm working on it. I don't know. I'm working on it. I think it's more about approaching with curiosity and not emotion. So it doesn't mean it's not important. I think it's just not giving it life like this is a big thing. If you've given something like, right, you say lowering the stakes. Wow, if I don't make this decision in the right way, the world will end.
I think what I heard you say right there was that the neutrality is a tool you can use, whereas the joy or the sadness does not need to equal numbness. That's not what this is about. It's just a tool you use in the moment to process. Yeah.
Yes. To de-escalate and to process and to look at it objectively and not driven by emotion. Yeah. I mean, how many times do you make a decision based on emotion? A lot of humans, we do that a lot. Yeah. So, and sometimes they don't work out for the best because, it's like responding to an angry text message.
Yeah.
Right. I'm an activator, so I like to do things very quickly. It's like I can wake up with an idea to go somewhere, and by like 6:30, I've already booked the flight and have my check-in instructions sent to me. Like it's really great for my family.
Yeah.
That's just how I operate, right? So sometimes in the past, if someone sends me a nastygram by a text over some way, shape, or form, may have nothing to do with me, or they're just really stressed, I immediately react, and respond back. Right? And it's off my plate because I'm also very busy. So I don't have time to, but if we really step back, and this is what I've gotten a lot better at, is just like, okay, let me look at this from a place of curiosity and not emotion. Yeah. And when you really start doing it that way and then neutralizing it, I think I make better decisions. I give better advice. And that's hard for me. Like I said, as an activator, it's really hard for me to slow down. Like I used to think slowing down was death, because like momentum and flow, let's go. So, but that goes back to awareness, understanding who you are, how you're wired. If any of it that has to be rewired a little bit, that's okay.
So Anna, what's next in life? What's now in life? What's the thing you're focusing on right now, or what's the thing you want to start?
Thank you for that reframe, because another awareness I had is that I spend a lot of my time in the future. I think a lot about what I'm going to be doing and where I'm going and what's going on, right? So, and I've been very mindful about being in the present more. So what's now and in the immediate future? So we have our show, The Real Shift Show, launching. So professionally, I'm really looking forward to taking Crowe Media to that next level, launching our show, sharing a lot of stories from these beautiful humans that we get to interview, and working on the next books. So that's all in progress. Personally, again, my own self journey and being able to show up in a higher self with my family, with my friends, with my community. I'm on a couple of boards. I want to make sure that I'm giving them the energy that they deserve as well. And so I think that's really the big stuff. Obviously I've got some travel with a family plan that I'm looking forward to, but again, it just goes back to the present. Like, how do I show up today? How do I give myself the right tools to make everything, or as much as I can, come to me with ease and grace versus forcing it? And working on surrendering really to that flow of life as much as I can, which is really hard for an achieving spirit.
I have found gratitude as the shortcut for me to surrender, is usually just to pay attention to the 99.9% of things going wonderfully right now, and not to the 0.1% of things that I am trying to complain about. So
true. I mean, gratitude is so powerful. And I think with that, also slowing down to just pay attention to the things around us that we take for granted. And it can sound pretty corny, but it's so important, like nature. Like this morning I saw we had a rose bloom outside. And I'll tell you, when I'm busy, I ignore that beautiful rose. And this morning I went outside, I'm like, look at this gorgeous rose. And if someone looked at me, they'd be like, this lady's lost her mind. Because I'm walking over, I'm smelling this rose. I've got 4,000 emails in my inbox, but I'm just smelling the roses. But that stuff matters, right? That stuff reconnects us to ourselves, reconnects us to the greater source, reconnects us to the people in our lives at the moment. And I think that's where, and it's really hard. And I think that's where joy lives, and that's like the whole thing, the whole point.
I am so grateful because my wife has this uncanny ability to just see beauty in everything. And so she reminds me of it all the time, and she doesn't have to explicitly, but just by the way she behaves, by what she does. We were walking on the beach one day and there was this pile of discarded seashells on a picnic table. And I didn't think twice of it. I was like, ugh, like a pile of this. And she just bent down and kind of took a photo of it, just a quick little snap, you know what I mean, in her way that she saw something glimmer. And when she posted it later, I was like, these were not the same seashells that I saw. But just from the angle she shifted and from the way she kind of caught the light, they were gorgeous. And I had just passed them by. I was like, there's nothing beautiful here. And really there was. And so I count my blessings for that one every day.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, you're so right. It's funny because anytime it rains in California, which doesn't happen often, but when it does, the landscapes look greener. They're just like a slightly greener shade. Yeah. And I make a point to mention it to my kids and my husband every time we're in the car. But sometimes now it's so annoying because I'll say, we'll be driving and they'll see like a big green patch. And I'll be like, oh man. They're like, yes, Mom, it's green. It looks green. I'm like, oh yeah, but like, look how beautiful that green is. To your point, it's like, you can always, I think if we all like do what you're talking about your wife, like, I mean, there's always beauty around us. And sometimes we get stuck in the what's not working and how do I fix this? But even just that shift in perspective can bring so much joy and serenity and peace to your mind, which at the end of the day, if there's no peace in our mind, like what's the point? Yeah,
100%. Anna, if people want to find you, if they want to get in touch, what's the best way?
Sure. My Instagram is at acrowepr. That's Crowe with an E. That's always a good place. crowepr.com is my business website, but it's got links to the book, to the TED on there as well. But yeah, I think those would be great places to start.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Stavros. Enjoy the conversation.
Anna Crowe, everybody. Thank you for joining another episode of the Wednesdays Off podcast, and see you next time.